Hello! Okay, for those of you returning to the channel, welcome back, and for those of you that are new here, that have just stumbled upon this video, then thank you for joining me, and welcome to my spoiler-free review of Nobody 2, this time directed by Timo Tchajanto and written by Derek Kolstad, the creator of the John Wick series. He wrote the first 3 John Wick movies, as well as the first Nobody, and he returns here with the sequel. I really enjoyed that first movie. I had a lot of fun with it, and I'm a big fan of the John Wick series. So when you've got the creator and the writer of those movies returning here with Nobody 2, then yeah, it gets me excited. So, the synopsis. After the chaos of the first film, Hutch Mansell is now working off a massive debt by taking on covert assassination jobs for his former handler, the Barber. At the same time, his family life is strained, especially with his wife Becca, who's tired of his double life. Hoping to reconnect, Hutch plans a peaceful family vacation to Plummersville, Wild Bill's Midway and Water Park. But peace doesn't last long. So yeah, I was really looking forward to this movie. And for the first 30 minutes, maybe first 30 to 40 minutes, I was having a good time. I was really enjoying myself. I feel like the film has a very strong start. The first act for me was without a doubt the strongest. And, you know, it kind of touches and flirts with these different themes. Nothing too complex, you know, with a movie like this, you know, you're not going to go in expecting anything too complex. But yeah, you know, it does sort of sow the seeds to these ideas within its story around, you know, nostalgia and reflection, reflecting on the times that made one happy, and then sort of going through a midlife crisis and sort of trying to kind of find yourself and reconnecting to sort of the good times in life and to those that you love, and all of that kind of very real human themes which they touch on you within its story and set up within its first act. And I say flirt because the film only ever really flirts with those ideas, with those themes, with, you know, this character's journeys and stories. But it's where our characters are at and how the characters are set up within the first act, within that first 30 minutes, that got me on board, that locked me in. It's almost like this movie for me was a bit of a blend of Home Alone, Die Hard, with a dash of True Lies. And like I said, I really liked what they were attempting and what they were trying to do with its characters in that first act. In moments, at times, this was a very bonkers, crazy, fun ride. Like, there was some real enjoyable, entertaining action set pieces and fight scenes. You know, you've got some real brutal, well choreographed fight scenes that are also shot in a very creative way that injects its energy into those moments. Like, for example, how the camera would follow Bill Odenkirk's character punching someone, and just the way in which the camera would follow someone sort of land into the ground after the impact and all of that. It kind of just added to the immersion of those moments, and they were incredibly fun, they were incredibly entertaining, and also very brutal and very gritty and violent, and I really appreciated that. Like, for example, you know, when Hutch, Bill Odenkirk's character, is punching someone in the gob, you've got teeth and blood flying all over the place. It doesn't fall into like cartoon violence territory, which I think it could have, and surprised me a little bit, because it's in these aspects that, you know, these moments for me that don't quite align with the movie's overall tone. For me, the tone within this movie doesn't quite work. I felt like it was quite inconsistent due to certain elements which I will touch on in a moment. But when it does come to its action set pieces and its fight scenes, you know, that kind of hand-to-hand combat, it is great fun to watch. Like, they are shot in a way that is very immersive. It's just very creative in the way in which they are brought to life visually and how the camera is used within these moments. Like, and they were without a doubt the highlights for me within this experience. But the movie for me quickly fell apart after that first act. After, say, the first 30 to 45 minutes, that's when the movie for me started to really derail and just fall apart. yes, it still had its moments of fun and entertainment and, bloody, gory action scenes and fight scenes and all of that. But the film became incredibly messy and it just fell apart. And one of the biggest issues that I did have with this movie, and I think it's very important for movies like this, is its villains. Its villains were by far the weakest, or one of the weakest elements in the movie. They're very cartoon-like, over the top. And yeah, okay, this is supposed to be a fun, entertaining action summer movie where you're supposed to turn your brain off for a couple of hours. I get that. You're not looking for the most complex thing ever. But for me, you still need a villain or villains that are compelling, that are naturally evil and not just a parody. Like, that's how they felt here within this movie, where, got Lendina and this corrupt sheriff, and they just felt like parodies, and they're just a little bit too goofy and over the top and silly and cartoon-like and very kind of forced. They're just, as a villains, there was nothing really compelling about them. Like, they're very two-dimensional, and yeah, it doesn't need to be complex. But what I'm going to use here as an example, and this is always a villain that I use as an example for when it comes to movies like this, and that is Clarence Bodica from RoboCop, right? Clarence Bodica is one of the most iconic villains in cinema history. And he's not even that complex. But the reason why that character is so iconic is because of how the character is brought to life. And what the actor was allowed to do within that movie in terms of improvising and just allowing him to sort of really add personality to that character. And it's a character that you end up despising. But at the same time, you can't help but, sort of admire how the character was being brought to life, because it has such a distinct personality and character about it. Like, it's a villain that works. It's a villain that evokes all the right emotions. So when RoboCop stabs him in the neck at the end and the blood splatters on RoboCop, you feel the satisfaction that, RoboCop has finally killed Clarence. And so I will always use Clarence Bodica as a prime example, a very good example of how to still create a very intriguing and compelling villain in action movies, especially, revenge stories. And I just feel like that's where they really failed here. And it's also kind of from a tonal perspective, like, the villains have this kind of cartoon-like goofy nature to them, but it doesn't quite align with other aspects of the movie as well, and it was quite jarring. Colin Hanks and Sharon Stone play the main two villains, and Sharon Stone was just incredibly cringe-inducing within this movie. And there are moments where she'll just do some sort of bizarre dance, and it just, it just felt very out of nowhere and random, which, okay, I do like having a bit of quirkiness and something, weird and bizarre and different, but this didn't naturally work for me. It was just we got to put this villain in here, so, Hutch has got a reason to go up against something. And then you got the sheriff, the character of the sheriff that just goes from 0 to 100, and, it's like, what are you doing in my town? Or, what are you doing eyeballing me? And, alright, that kind of plays into sort of the Western aspect of its story, which I really like, by the way. The movie does have that kind of a Western approach to its story as well. But, the sheriff and sort of his kind of sort of motivations and sort of what drives that particular character to why he's doing what he's doing, it was just very flat. There was just nothing there to kind of really sort of buy into the character, really. I mean, this particular villain, the sheriff, was just very bland and dull. You know what I mean? And I kind of just wanted Hutch to kill him because of how bland and dull he was, not because of what he was actually doing within the story. And for me, the villains, like I said, I think for a movie like this to really work, whether it be a revenge story or a movie like this, I think the villains are key to sort of really get you behind the character's journey and story. And yes, I know this movie is one of those movies where you are supposed to just be, have fun, be entertained, have a few laughs. But for me personally, it just didn't really come together and work. And the reason why I pick on the villains is because, you know, I really feel like you need a compelling villain to really give a shit about the unlucky situation that our character is in. Yes, that is also aided by how our hero is written and the circumstances that he finds himself within, you know, along with the performances from Bill Odenkirk, but the villain aspect never worked for me. And I can use another example, Die Hard. You know, Die Hard is quite a straightforward, basic, movie, but it's one of the greatest action films ever made. And a lot of that is down to how the hero is brought to life and how the hero is written, as well as his villain, played by the great Alan Rickman, who plays Gruber. Do you know what I mean? Again, nothing too complex, but the villain is an iconic villain due to how he's written and brought to life within that movie. And I feel like today it's very rare that we get movies like that, where you can just have this kind of basic, straight up, fun, entertaining action movie that gets you, you know, to some degree emotionally involved with it, and still not be not be too complex. I think films really struggle with that today, and they just sort of go too extreme in the one direction, you could say. Like with these, for example, which it just ended up becoming just a bit too parody-like and a bit too cartoon-like. I couldn't get over sort of how messy the movie became, and how much I kind of just, you know, because I was so on board within that first 30 minutes, because of it's what I felt was a strong setup, I just couldn't believe how fast, for me personally, the movie derailed. Now, I know not everyone is going to agree with me on this, and not everyone is going to have had the same experience as I did. In fact, I think when it comes to this movie, and from what I briefly kind of looked at when it comes to how people are feeling towards this movie, I'm definitely in a minority here. But the film, for me, just fell apart very quickly within its second and third act. It was quite messy. It felt like we were missing moments of character, and so it was kind of lacking that kind of connective tissue between certain moments. For example, how a character would go from being this kind of very motherly character to trying to keep a family together and sort of battling her own kind of issues and worries and concerns, to then transitioning to this kind of warrior-like character. And I'm talking about the wife here, played by Connie Nielsen, who's very great, who's very good, by the way. And it's like that transition never worked for me within the movie, and there's a lot that the movie also alludes to as well. Like Christopher Lloyd in this movie as the father of Hutch. I mean, he's absolutely wasted here. Like, there's this one moment that I just absolutely enjoyed him in. You know, it's an action scene in the third act, and he's got this gun, and he's great. Every moment that Christopher Lloyd is in this movie, he is fantastic. But I always found myself wanting more of him, and just, you know, and again, it's an aspect of the story where they flirt with something perhaps a little deeper in regards to sort of the relationships with father and son, and, you know, adoptive brother, and all of that. Like, this family dynamic, it flirts with a lot of ideas and themes, which does sort of put this kind of big beating heart at the middle of the story, but that heart is very faint as a result of them losing focus on those sort of characters' journeys and that kind of family dynamic. It never really fully materializes. Like, it kind of flirts with certain aspects of its story and ideas, and I found myself really wanting to know more, but it never really goes anywhere with that. In fact, you know, this movie might have even worked, even with, say, the villains in their current form, you know, retaining that kind of the sort of the over-the-top cartoon nature of its villains. You know, this movie could still have worked if maybe the narrative didn't become so clunky and messy in those second and third acts. You know, losing the focus on the heart and characters' journeys of the movie. And that's why it kind of led me to believe, like, you know, it almost kind of felt like you got that strong 30 minutes and then they just decided, oh, do you know what, fuck it, let's go all bonkers, crazy, fun and goofy and all of that. And yes, okay, like I said, in moments I still had fun in some of its action, you know, in some of its sort of fight scenes. You know, there's a fight scene on this duck boat, and Yes, it's incredibly fun. I had a lot of fun with that moment, but it was in that moment where I was starting my interest within the movie was starting to wane due to sort of how all of these moments sort of came together within the second and the third act, and how it was just annoying me because it was flirting with an interest in ideas and themes with where they were taking their characters and the journey that they were on. But that kind of just sort of fizzles out, and then everything else then that I had issues with, like its villains, sort of just became blowing up, you could say. And yeah. Oh, by the way, Bill Odenkirk, Connie Nielsen and Christopher Lloyd, they're all great here. Bill Odenkirk is another reason to why I did remain sort of locked in, you could say, even though it did fall apart for me very fast. He is one of the main reasons why I just sort of remained locked in right through to the end, because I liked what he was doing with the character, and I really like Connie Nielsen here as the wife, but then how her character evolves through the story and sort of how she sort of transitions from what the character is in the beginning to the third act. It didn't feel natural enough. It didn't feel organic enough. And it did just kind of feel out of the blue, like a lot of other aspects and elements to the story. So yeah, this was a frustrating experience for me, Nobody 2. Like I said, I think I'm in a minority here when it comes to this particular movie. Some people might just go, oh, for God's sake, for fuck's sake, Ash, just have fun. It was entertaining. You got some great fight scenes here. But it's like, yes, but there had to be something in the movie that kept me on board with these characters' journeys and stories and get me sort of to some degree emotionally involved. I'm not saying this had to be the deepest, most complex thing ever. It's not that type of movie, and I get that. Die Hard is a very good example of that, and this is, the ideas were there. This movie had the potential. It like I said, it kind of reminded me of a blend. It was almost like a blend of Home Alone, Die Hard, and True Lies. And for that first 30 minutes, I was locked in. I was on board. But for me, unfortunately, it just fell apart very fast in that second and third act. And a lot of it was down to sort of the writing in moments. I mean, some of the writing in moments was, like, again, very cringy. Like a character would say something like, I could easily kill you right now, or something. It was something like that. And I was just like, I died inside, and I'm like, oh my God, like, it's almost as if the writer had changed halfway through the story. Because I wouldn't say the writing was consistently bad, but there were just moments of it where it was like, oh, like, it was very on the nose to the point where, was that intentional? And so, yeah, very, very bizarre. A bizarre experience and a frustrating experience for me. So, yeah, this is a movie that I felt like could easily have worked. It could have easily have worked, perhaps, with the villains in his current form, like I just said. But there was a lot of issues in that second and third act where I just felt like we were missing moments, and sort of it was very clunky and how it came together. At the same time, I don't think this film needed to be any longer than what it was. But then maybe a lot of that was just down to sort of how fast the movie fell apart for me. So yeah, look, they are my thoughts on Nobody 2. Quite a bit of a disappointment for me. But yeah, and I will be giving Nobody 2. My thoughts on Nobody 2, but what did you guys think? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Did you agree or disagree with anything I've said? Then please let me know in the comments below, and let's get a discussion going. And if you want to watch future movie reviews, I'm just some random Welsh geek rambling on, then please hit the subscribe button. It will mean an awful lot to me. I am a little bit behind with cinema releases. I'm going to be catching together today. I'm really looking forward to checking that out. And then you've also got a bunch of other releases. The Life of Chuck is another movie that I'm really looking forward to catching, and that will probably be my next movie review. I do still have, and I know I've been saying this now for weeks, but my retro review of Crack in the World is on the way. And you've also got my review of episode 3, Metamorphosis of Alien Earth. That is also on the way and will probably drop at some point over the weekend. And just another big thank you to everyone that has supported the channel, whether it be liking, commenting, subscribing. It means the world to me. A big hello and thank you to the most recent subscribers. It will always amaze me that so many of you do want to follow just some random Welsh geek ramble on about film and TV. But yeah, that's it from me for now, guys. Thank you all for watching. I really do appreciate it. I'll be catching you guys soon.